person who's actually been quite successful doing just that. He is a UK-based full-time artist, Sam Cox, otherwise known as Mr. Doodle, or I believe Doodle Man as well, depending on your preference. He's famous for his unique style of detailed drawing, usually with just a simple black marker, and his work has appeared in various mediums ranging from walls to furniture to vehicles, basically anything that has a surface that you can doodle on. So our guest right now, here in the studio, Sam Cox, Mr. Doodle, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we are here on Korea 24 on the radio medium, and unfortunately we don't have a visual way of showcasing your work, but we're also filming this as well, and I understand before we started this interview that you are willing to perhaps doodle a bit as we continue this conversation, and then perhaps show our listeners what you're going to come up with?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm going to start doing a big drawing in the middle of this piece of paper, and while we speak, okay, I'm going to add to it. So I'm just going to start by doing the big kind of letters of KBS, World Radio, and then I'm going to build some stuff around that. So
all right, yeah. Sounds good. So while you're doing that, we'll get to know each other a little bit better. Again, I know that a lot of these questions you've been asked many times in the various media appearances that you've made, but doodling, how did you come up with the thought or the concept that, you know what, this could be a career for me?
The purest way to make artwork, and I always felt an itch to kind of make work quickly and instinctively, and I find that doodling is the greatest way to do that.
And, I've read in Korean media where they'll talk about it in a sense of where they relate it to something like graffiti. This is very different, would you say, than the famous iconic graffiti artists that we've known that have images all over the world?
Yeah, I think, well, for me, it's like I kind of want to create artwork to have fun, and it's really just an itch to make something very quickly. It does have relations to graffiti, I think, because I've got this kind of desire to draw over everything all the time, like over my clothes and my bedroom and my house.
Yeah.
But it's kind of different because it doesn't have the letters, and it's not often spray painted, but it's definitely got kind of, it's almost like it's related to graffiti, I think. It's in the kind of offspring of that.
Right. And you've made a lot of appearances in various exhibitions, events, what have you. One of your notable accomplishments is doing sort of a Doodle Marathon, I guess you can say, right? A 50-hour straight feat of endurance and creativity, and
yeah,
you were for 50 hours drawing on the walls of the We Built This City gallery in London. How difficult was that, and how I guess interesting an experience was it?
Yeah, I mean, I love to push myself in kind of ways to see how much work I can create in a certain amount of time, and doing stuff like that for charity is always a good reason to kind of get myself drawing for that long. I always loved to draw, ever since I was in school when I was younger. I used to stay up all night drawing, and I love the idea of just staying awake for a long amount of time and seeing what happens to the drawings after a certain amount of time. And it was very difficult. It got to about the 35th hour or something, and I just felt so tired, and it was so difficult to kind of keep myself awake like that. But there was a lot of people there kind of watching me, and
right,
that pressure kind of keeps me going and keeps me drawing. So it was a really fun thing, and when I finished, it was a great feeling. And I'm not sure I'd do it again, because it was just it really took it out of me, But I have so much energy to draw that I found was the best way to express that to an audience, to do something like a 50-hour Doodle Marathon.
Well, speaking of those challenges, as you point out, this is something that you've been doing since you were a little kid. It was a creative outlet for you. This idea that you could just dedicate your life, your career to doing something like this. I'm wondering, because when we typically think of artists, we think of maybe somebody who works with clay, sculpting, someone on a canvas, creating these works of art, whether it's, modern art, cubism, what have you. Did you face, under the premise that this is not a mainstream form of expressing art, did you face any resistance, or people telling you, what are you doing? This is not something that you're going to be able to make a living out of?
Yeah, I mean, well, even now people still say to me, like, what is this you're doing? And I don't know, like I kind of like it because what I want to do with my work is make it accessible to everyone, and I find that anyone can doodle. Everyone does doodle, like when they're on the phone or when they're just like writing with their finger on condensation windows and things. Like everyone's just making small kind of drawings like that, and I love the fact that my work can reach all those audiences through that simple way. But I always think back to like cavemen and people from ages ago, and they would drawing on caves and just making quick doodles. So I always see doodling as like the main like primitive first ways of making artwork. I find that everything after that is an extension of that, and so in that sense, like I think doodling is like the truest way to kind of make artwork. So that's the kind of argument that I go with, I think. Yeah.
And not to completely bash the typical thing that we think of as so-called highbrow art, but maybe this image of a stodgy art gallery and people in their three-piece suits and elegant cocktail dresses and sipping wine while they're perusing and contemplating all these works of art with their various interpretations of what's going on. This is a very different form of expression in terms of art. You mentioned the idea of accessibility and how people, whether you're a toddler and you see something that you're drawing, like right now before our eyes, or a guy who's maybe older, an adult who doesn't necessarily have that sensibility of what exactly highbrow art is. Do you feel that world that you inhabit is actually a preferable place to be rather than those fancy galleries and the auction halls?
Yeah, I think there's definitely advantages to both of those worlds, and I wouldn't ever rule out audiences from one or the other.
Right.
But I think that the idea of my kind of what I do reaching someone who wouldn't necessarily step into an art gallery but might see me on the street kind of dressed in my doodles, and giving them like a sense of joy through artwork is fun for me because it's new and exciting. It's not usually the kind of person that would go into it like a fine art gallery, and I think that does excite me more perhaps than following that kind of traditional route of an audience. But like I think it is important to me that my work's kind of available and accessible to everyone. So yeah, I think that anyone's kind of welcome to be in my kind of doodle world,
The of course, reason you're here in our studio is that you are visiting Seoul, and so your art is being exhibited for the first time in this country. Can you tell a little bit, for our listeners' benefit, what the exhibition is about, how you're displaying it, and some of the notable works that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So the exhibition's called Doodle World. It's a collection of 4 months' work that I created this year, and all the work in the show is based around the idea of because I've always wanted to doodle all over the world. Ever since I drew over my bedroom and all over walls and rooms and things, I thought I'd love to draw over a town and go really crazy with it. So the kind of idea is that I've doodled over all these famous landmarks and political leaders. Like there's drawings of a big doodle of President Moon Jae-in and landmarks like the Eiffel Tower and the Sphinx. And they're all kind of made out of my drawings. So I kind of approached these subject matters, and then I made the drawings specific to the subject of the piece as well. So like in there's a doodle of Donald Trump, and in that there's kind of loads of like American themed drawings and things like that. So it's really just the idea of doodles taking over the world through lots of kind of famous imagery, but also there's full room installations where you can step into like an immersive doodle environment, and loads of really fun stuff that I just thought was the best kind of expression of me at this stage in my art life, really. Yeah.
What's the experience been like here in Korea? I understand that you are part of some very successful marketing campaigns with some very well-known Korean brands, but overall, just not just the artsy-fartsy people, but just the average guys on the street. How have they received your work here in Korea?
Yeah, it's been. I mean, I love coming to Seoul and seeing South Korea. It's really lovely every time. This is my 3rd time here, so every day that I've been here. It's been really pleasant, and there's been people in the street that have stopped me for selfies and things like that, and that's always really fun. It's amazing to me to see people that live so far away from where I do and where I create work at home, and them get really excited by kind of seeing me and seeing my work. That really touches me and makes me feel at home in a place that's so far away from my home.
All right. Well, Sam, we got a couple more questions. I believe you're almost wrapping things up as well, so we can maybe display this in a photograph as well as a video feed for our listeners. But bucket list. You have experienced drawing on things like walls, cars, clothes, just to name a few things. You've even done that 50-hour marathon doodling session. Anything else left on that bucket list? Anything that you'd like to accomplish, whether it's a surface or an interesting feat or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, there's always more stuff, like the world's full of really exciting canvases, and the whole universe is a canvas, really. I think that artists should look at the world and think of the whole place as, their canvas, not just what's in their sketchbook, but what's outside. And I'd love to draw over an aeroplane, like a whole town would be amazing. Like I'd love to make a whole town of doodles where every building's kind of covered in all my drawings, and you can step inside and maybe colour in the buildings, and kids could go there, and it'll be kind of like a theme park but with artwork.
Wow.
That's my main kind of dream, just making a doodle town or a huge environment that people can step into that's just full of artwork.
Well, that's going to be an impressive feat, obviously something that we would all look forward to. Just a final question for our listeners. Many of them may be artistically inclined. Maybe they are trying to plunge their feet into the art world, maybe even pursue it as a career, but they might have different thoughts of what is the so-called mainstream way to go about things. And what kind of advice would you give people who do want to pursue art and maybe want to go that so-called off the beaten path method?
Yeah, I think that going, on a far away from what is traditional art is exciting and should be embraced by artists. I think that ultimately what I would say you've got to do is that you can listen to everyone's suggestions and advice and pick the things that resonate with you and that you find something in, and only kind of follow that path and find what is special to you and what's unique to you, and blow that up as kind of big as you can. Really exaggerate and promote and sell the thing that's individual to you, and then I think that's this kind of the way that I found the most success through. Right. But everyone's really got to do what feels right for them. It's very hard to kind of give advice to people who make art. I think there's so many ways to approach it, but I think just got to find what's fun and blow that up, really. Yeah.
Well, that's great advice indeed. It's time for the big reveal. Perhaps you can put it out there to display for our camera. All right, great job. This was just in the next the 14 minutes that we talked with each other. Sam Cox, Mr. Doodle, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.